Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there with that real awkward pause of mine. I am happy to introduce a fully capable internet-hosted Bobby Pinero, CEO and co-founder of Equals. Can you just tell us, are you going to tell us in your deck what Equals is, or are you going to tell us now?
I don't have any information about Equals in the deck itself. Equals is a next-generation spreadsheet with built-in connections to any database, versioning, and live collaboration.
I put you on the spot for your elevator talk, so good job. As a co-founder, you got to be ready for that at all times.
Exactly.
So that's awesome. You are based in Washington, D.C. You're previously Senior Director of Finance and Analytics at Intercom. No small task there, so I'd imagine. Senior Finance Analyst at Inflection and Finance Analyst at IBM. Sounds like you've been doing some finance your life. It has a note here for me to hype up that we have Donnie leading the Data Horror Stories Hour in the lounge after this session. So is that true? What does that even mean?
That sounds brutal. I don't know what that is, but that sounds okay. The Data Horror Stories. I mean, I could give you some Data Horror Stories at the end of this too.
I say we better do that at the end. So I've been asking everybody a question about summer since this is the summer community days. I thought that was a note related to you, not just everything. Sorry about that. So my question is, I have two questions. When you're like lying on the beach in the summer, what's the finance question, train of thought that's going through your head? Does that happen to you? Because it happens to me all the time. What is that question that keeps going through your head?
Finance question?
Yeah, or maybe that doesn't happen. But.
Oh, I mean, I think I'm usually just trying to calculate some math about like how much business the hotel is doing, and oh my God, they're charging me like 3 times the amount. How much is this Mai Tai? How much are they making?
That's awesome.
I'm usually trying to do
awesome.
That.
Awesome. Yeah, good. I'm glad I'm not the only crazy one here. Well, with that, I'm happy to introduce Bobby Pinero, CEO and co-founder of Equals, with his talk for the Operational Analysts Club. Just a reminder, there is a chat going on, and you can ask questions in the Q&A, and I'm sure we'll cover those in the very end of this talk. So go get them, Bobby.
Thanks, Trevor. All right. Every analyst is a finance analyst. We'll see if I convince you by the end of this. The world is changing for analysts. It's shifting right under our feet. Business used to be analog. You'd walk into a store and you'd buy software. Marketing took place at in-person events or on billboards, in brochures. Sales meetings happened over steak dinners and cocktails. Product was installed on somebody's machine or hosted behind some firewall. Today, all of that, the entire customer journey, it's happening online. This conference, every sales touch point you have with the customer, how your customer is on board, every invoice, every feature they use in your product happens digitally. And more importantly, it's logged in a database somewhere. And more of our lives are moving in that direction, right? If I have to convince you even further, there are some huge tech giants out there working quite hard to literally get us to live our entire lives digitally. At the same time, we've built all of this technology and invested billions, if not trillions of dollars collectively every year into these data stacks to help us load, consolidate, move, transform, democratize, normalize, make more accessible, faster, more orderly, all of our data. It's wild. And then we yell at each other until we're blue in the face on LinkedIn and Twitter about it all. The ultimate result of this shift is that everything is measurable. More and more of our business, more of the interactions we have with our customers at a higher level of fidelity and across a much wider surface area of our business. And so this has really important consequences for analysts. So if you peek into any company, and what you used to see were silos of data. So you'd have top of funnel data reporting in one place. You'd have billing data in one place. You'd have conversion funnel analysis somewhere else. Product usage, sales metrics, financial statements. And today, they're all connected, or at least We're doing our very best. You talk to any kind of analytics leader and they're doing their very best to bring it all together. And so what used to be the job of an analyst used to be to own this, an area like this, top of funnel reporting. Where do visits come from? How many leads did we get? What was the channel mix? Things like that. Now, for an analyst to be successful in the same role, they have to understand something like this. So to give you to pull this example a little further, a marketing analyst here needs to speak to the efficacy of a specific campaign, not just by the number of visits or leads that it generates, but by how many of those leads converted, how they've retained, maybe even what their NPS is. To give you another example, a product analyst today, they need to opine on new or existing features, not just based on usage or forecasted usage or NPS, but also by how much that might impact net revenue retention or sales win rates. And a finance analyst, right? It goes in the other direction. A finance analyst needs to be able to attribute, let's say cohorts change. Performance in cohorts are different, and they need to be able to attribute that to something shift in the product, a mix shift change in leads or new customers, a change in sales strategy. And so the ultimate result of this, what's happening, is that analyst work is colliding. I saw this firsthand while I was at Intercom, where I led finance, analytics, biz ops, and a few other teams over the course of 8 years. I saw the company go from 20 employees to 700 employees. And I see and hear similar stories from founders, finance folks, operation folks, analytics leaders on a daily basis. As our businesses require answers that span a much larger surface area, more data, analysts are becoming kind of positionless. And so you see this manifest in that it's getting harder and harder to define the roles and responsibilities between different analysts, between marketing analysts, sales analysts, product analysts, finance analysts. And you see it in the rise of business operations as a thing, right? Generalists that can span the entire business. You see this in the consolidation of marketing ops and rev ops, or marketing ops and sales ops into rev ops. And you see it in the endless debates that we have about whether or not to centralize or hub and spoke analytics teams. And you see finance and analytics teams also popping up all over the place. And so when shifts like this happen, I believe we have to go back to fundamentals. If you've spent a bunch of time around kids, I have two kids, 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. I'm hoping they don't run on stage with me here. But if you spend a bunch of time around kids, they all hit a point in their lives where they just start asking why. Why? And so let's just channel our inner 5-year-old for a minute here and ask, why do we do analysis, right? Let's take an example. So let's say conversion rate's down in our business. Why does it matter that conversion rate's down? Well, we're going to get less new customers. Why does it matter that we get less new customers? Well, the business will not grow as fast. Why does it matter that we not grow as fast? Well, if we don't grow as fast, it makes less sense for us and anyone else to invest in our business. Why does it make less sense for anyone to invest in our business? Well, because that same investment will yield more elsewhere. And so while this is like a silly example, do this enough times across the entirety of your business, and every question you ask will all point back to the same place, the atomic unit of every business. And that's return on investment, ROI. It's the only way to truly, really make trade-offs in your business. Should we build that new feature? The answer comes back to ROI. Who should we hire next? Comes back to ROI. How should we change our pricing, or what iterations of pricing should we put out into the world? Comes back to ROI. What marketing channel should we try next? ROI. It all comes back to ROI. And so an analysis today is no longer complete until it gets to ROI, until it answers that question, what is the ROI? Now, obviously I'm oversimplifying a little bit here. Not every single analysis can exactly finish at ROI. There are some things that you just can't quantify and can't measure. But but the point is, as our data allows us to span broader surface areas across our business and to connect the dots between different functions and to get closer, the arc of every analysis should point closer and closer back to ROI. So again, that marketing campaign, that pricing analysis, that hiring decision, that new feature that you're thinking about building, it's increasingly possible, and we increasingly need to frame those questions and those answers in terms of the return it's going to drive in the business relative to other choices. So, okay, now what for analysts? I believe there are two behaviors we need to drive as analyst leaders. Call them the two big fundamentals. These are the foundations upon which great ROI pointing or ROI based analyses are built. And they give you the best chance, in my opinion, to drive real impact in the business. So here they are, the two skills that every analyst, I think, should be working on. The first, financial analysis. So first here is really understand how your business works, your business model works. So if you're in a SaaS business, for example, do you see these three charts and know immediately what they mean and why they're important? For example, is it obvious to you why, as you grow faster in your SaaS business, your cash flow worsens? Or have you internalized the real difference between positive and negative monthly churn rates? Or why lengthening payback periods have such a detrimental impact on a SaaS business? There's some great resources to go learn this. These three charts in particular are from a blog post by David Skok. It's, I would say, the most fundamental, most important blog post that's written on SaaS metrics. Great. I'd highly recommend reading it. But really, if you're in a SaaS business, understand how it works. If you're in other business models, deeply understand how they work. Build a one-page financial model. Model it. Spend a week or so building a spreadsheet model of how revenue comes to be in your business. You'll be surprised at the questions that it forces you to ask and how few on your team might even be able to do it. And it's super worthwhile exercise for you and your team to just connect the dots from the very top, from visits to paid customers to a retained customer to an upsold customer to a churn customer. What are all the assumptions that you have to make along the way? What are the drivers at every step along the way? And better yet, if you feel really ambitious, you can model some variable costs. You could say, how do we start to incorporate, the money that we spend from a marketing perspective, the money that we spend on sales headcount, the cost of goods sold, our variable headcount to support our revenue. I know that sounds like a lot, but build something very high level. Every business can be modeled in one page in a spreadsheet. Don't use fancy formulas. Constrain yourself to only one tab, and you'll start to develop an appreciation for how your business actually comes to be, how revenue comes to be, and the variable costs that drive that revenue come to be. And again, as you connect those dots, it'll serve you as you build future analyses. It'll help you start to see the path towards quantifying ROI. And then finally, don't stop until you get to ROI. Just keep asking yourself that question over and over and over again. How do I frame an analysis in terms of the return on investment that we're getting? Don't finish an analysis. And so it's never enough to just show what the lead volume was. It's okay, lead volume turned into this revenue, which means, this is going to impact our business, our overall business in this way relative to other things. Okay, so keep pushing your analyses to ROI. And then the second big fundamental, get self-sufficient in data. For the love of all that is holy, learn to query SQL. And I'm talking to finance folks. I'm talking to biz ops folks, accounting, marketing ops, sales ops, analytics, any analyst out there. As our work today spans these larger surface areas, and as we consolidate it all into these data warehouses, knowing how to access it becomes ever more critical. So relying on others to pull you data or set you up some dashboard, aside from being slow and inefficient, it's like reading a translation of any piece of literature. You're depending entirely on the translator, right? And almost always some sort of context is lost in translation. And then the beauty of SQL is that, like any programming language, if there's no room for nuance or interpretation, right? The simple act of writing a query is a forcing function to understand precisely what you're asking of the business and to document an explicit record of how that question was asked. It's, in my opinion, the most dependable way to build a strong understanding of your business. And it's like learning to read a map of how your business works. Best of all, it's actually not hard to learn. Most folks I hired at Intercom, I never screened for SQL skills up front, but it was a requirement that within the first 2 weeks, they learned to query SQL. And every single one of them did. And again, to be clear, I'm just talking about querying. We're not writing tables. We're not transforming tables. And each one of them, I think, just from learning SQL, were at least 10x more effective at their job relative to analysts on other teams within Intercom who didn't know SQL. So leaders, make it a requirement that folks on your team, analysts on your team, learn SQL. Okay, I'm going to give you one more bonus final point here. Finance and analytics, I think, are actually better together, especially in the early stages of companies. Why? Because they're actually the same job in the beginnings. So early finance is analytics. Early finance isn't accounting. It's not account receivables. It's not payroll or procurement. It's not forecasting, budgeting, planning. The early days of finance are really organizing and defining metrics, diagnosing data issues, building, that first scrappy marketing attribution model, customer lifetime model. It's about establishing a culture of metrics and quantitative analysis and using that quantitative analysis to maximize ROI. And if that sounds like early analytics, right, well, that's the point. And so together, finance and analytics are actually much more likely to build analyses that point back to ROI. And in doing so, you can establish that culture early on. So in summary, everything now is measurable. Analysts are being asked to span larger surface areas. Our work is colliding. Every analysis ultimately points back to the atomic unit of business, ROI. And to keep up, analysts need 2 fundamental skills: financial skills and data self-sufficiency. That's it. Thank you.
That was great, Bobby. I'm reluctantly convinced by that argument. I'm also out of breath because I just had to get my dog out before I realized you were finishing your talk. Great job. So I think the big question I have that I put in the Q&A was, what is, I haven't got a vote for it. Thanks, Brittany. What is or maybe it was you, Bobby, what is the minimum viable finance education for analysts? So I didn't do finance in school. I think I took one business class, in fact, as a person who went to school for landscape architecture. So how can I catch up? What's the fastest way to catch up?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do a lot of finance stuff in school either. And I think a lot of it just comes back to practice and being, trying, experimenting, learning, opening up a spreadsheet. You can use Excel or you can try equals, and just starting to, take that article, that David Scott article, for example. He's got some examples in there of how a SaaS business works. And he's got examples of different customers, how they retain, the payback periods associated with them, and just copy his model. Just build it. Just say, okay, all right, I'm going to put these numbers in these cells, and I'm going to see what kind of happens when I change the inputs. And that's it. It's really just starting there. And then, okay, can you take that model and maybe think about how it might apply to your business? Say, okay, if you're a SaaS business, how might I start to fill in, okay, the first payment of a customer? How might I build a cohort for customers? Okay, how might I take that cohort and then expand it into a revenue forecast, because I know those cohorts turn into certain things. Sure. And so it's not I guess to summarize, I'd say it's not like you need a financial education. It's just piece by piece, bit by bit. You learn it by just practicing and trying.
For sure. Makes sense. And no, so after you've gone so strong on SQL, why did you just recommend that we do it in a spreadsheet?
Well, I think so there's limitations, right? The thing about equals is that equals is a spreadsheet with SQL. So
softball for you there.
So there's actually SQL is obviously insanely powerful for getting data out of a data warehouse, for querying information, for codifying the data that underpins your business. But a spreadsheet is this like canvas on which you get to touch and feel the data, move it around, play with it, build compounding things, build models in a way that no other data tool out there lets you do. And that's why equals is a spreadsheet. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a good question too. Where do you draw the line? Where does the gray area end between spreadsheets and SQL? What's the appropriate tool for the job?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends.
I was actually okay. Good. No, go ahead.
Oh no, I think it. I mean, we take the opinion that SQL equals is built on top of your data warehouse. So we are not trying to do any of the transformation of your data. We are not trying to be like the LookML to Looker was. We are a way that lets you iterate on analyses much faster in a spreadsheet that's connected to your SQL database that maintains a record of truth as well between the analyses that you do end up building in a spreadsheet and your database. And that's it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Cool. I had a question which I'm forgetting now, but I wanted to let everybody know who's listening and who listened to the chat. The article that you had mentioned is now linked in the chat. Those data visualizations were horrific. I never want to look at them again. But I think that's just the nature of cohorting data, but also Excel, for God's sakes, like why is it so bad? That link's in the chat after your endorsement. Definitely going to check it out. The preview image is horrifying though. Yeah. And with a note on horrifying, beautiful segue here. In the lounge coming up on the lunch hour, thankfully I get to eat lunch finally, for 8 minutes, is data analytics horror stories with our guy, help me out here, Donnie from Census, our customer data architect, Donnie. For those of you who are still here and just tired of listening to my voice, you can jump over there, and then we'll have a talk with Peter Fine about everything you need to know about data engineering in 3 hours. That is a big promise. A lot of big promises today, including yours, Bobby. So hang tight for that. Bobby, thank you for sharing with us this compelling argument. And where can people kind of find out more from you and reach out if they need to?
Yeah, folks can find me I'm on Twitter, Bobby Pinero. You always email me, bobby@equals.app. And then you can read any of my writing. I write a lot on wraptext.equals.app.
Say that again. What?
Wrap text, like the spreadsheet, like wrapping the text in a spreadsheet. Wraptext.equals.app.
Got it. Wow, that's
there's a lot of.
It's really good, but it's a lot of spreadsheet jokes. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you around. And again, the conversation about data horror stories is happening right now in the lounge with Donnie from Census. See y'all.
Thanks, Trevor.